Hi everyone, this is Brandon with Coastline Equity, a property management company based out here in Southern California. And today we're going to be talking about a subject that often goes underappreciated. It's also something that we think is extremely important to understand as a landlord so that you can better protect yourself and your investment. And that, friends, is tenant insurance. Now, this will be the insurance that you will require your tenants to have, not the insurance that you use to cover your building. We'll go over that in another video. Nevertheless, tenant insurance is going to be crucial in protecting you and your property from any legal actions while you have renters occupying your building. We're going to go over 3 variations of tenant insurance that you as a landlord want to be familiar with: liability to landlord insurance, renter's insurance, and commercial liability insurance. So let's jump right into it. First, let's talk about liability to landlord insurance, because this is the bare minimum that you should require your tenants to have. It's designed primarily to protect you, the landlord, from any liability in the case that the tenant has caused any kind of damage. A simple example of this might be if one of your tenants lit some candles in their apartment and this inadvertently caused smoke damage, or if their negligence led to some kind of flooding in the unit. Now, you might think that you already have insurance on the building and that your policy already covers these issues. Well, if the negligence of your tenant has caused this type of damage, then there's no use in making a claim or suffering any potential price increases or changes to your own policy. Instead, the tenant will utilize their policy for the damages that they caused. Now, here at Coastline, all of our standard residential leases state that tenants must obtain insurance to cover their liability for damage to your property, which is referred to in the lease as the required insurance. This must be presented to you before they move in, thus making sure that you're protected from the very day that the new lease begins. Now, the amount of coverage that we require tenants to have is a minimum of $100,000. And that amount protects you from liability that could result from damage caused by things such as fire, smoke, water damage, explosion, and the backup or overflow of a sewer drain. What's more is that if your tenant does not maintain the required insurance, the lease that we use states that you as the landlord may purchase this insurance on their behalf and then bill them accordingly. Now, this is important because it means that you'll never have to wait on your tenant in order to ensure that you're protected. Okay, so the liability to landlord insurance is just the bare minimum that you should require of your tenants in order to protect you from the damages that they might cause. But next, let's talk about an even better solution for protecting your investment, and that would be renter's insurance. Now, this type of policy actually works out better for everyone, both you and your tenant, since it not only covers damage to the property, but it also protects the tenant in some very important ways. Now, while the specifics can change based on the exact policy that the tenant gets, generally speaking, it will usually cover the following: theft or damage to the tenant's personal belongings, the cost of temporary housing, and costs associated with any pets. So let's go over each of these individually and then explain why this is beneficial to both of you. First of all, it's often the case that tenants simply assume that their personal property will be covered by their insurance policy. But if all they have is the bare minimum insurance that we mentioned earlier, this will not be the case. The best strategy for them would be to require a renter's insurance policy. This way, their personal belongings would be covered from theft and damage, making their insurance provider responsible to either reimburse them for the value of the items lost or opt to replace them with brand new ones. Second, if some issue makes their unit uninhabitable for a time, this policy will often cover the costs of housing them in a temporary place. For example, let's say a tenant causes an overflow in their restroom, which seeps out and gets into their bedroom, the living room, and it soaks the entire carpet in the house, making the home unlivable until everything can be torn out and replaced. In most cases, the landlord must address the issue itself. However, they're not required to find a temporary place for the tenant to live while the job is being completed. Plus, the tenant can still be liable for paying rent, even if they need to move elsewhere for a few days. Fortunately, most renters insurance policies will cover the costs of hotel bills, restaurant meals, temporary storage, and other expenses incurred while their unit is being rehabbed. The third issue that renters insurance will commonly cover is liability caused by the tenant's pets. So for example, if someone on your property is bitten and needs to go to the hospital, or the tenant's pet damages someone else's personal property, the renter's insurance policy can cover medical costs and the cost of replacing any damaged items. Okay, so as a landlord, it may be tempting to think, Hey, as long as my property is covered, I'm not too concerned about whether or not the tenant covers their belongings and their own expenses. However, renter's insurance doesn't just benefit the tenant. It also saves you a ton of headaches. Trust us, as property managers, whether or not you are technically liable for damages caused by tenants is separate from the fact that it's still a hassle to simply deal with angry tenants that are attempting to get you to cover the costs of their negligence. And while working through tenant issues is all part of the job, life is just so much easier when you can prevent a problem from happening in the first place, right? But not only that, it just helps to avoid being put in this challenging position where you want to be generous, understanding, and helpful, but you really weren't at fault for the damages, and you don't have a legal obligation to pay for them. Lastly, it gives you extra peace of mind when renting to tenants that have pets. In the past, we've had some clients who were very apprehensive about leasing to tenants with pets because of the damage that they might cause. Now, this is understandable, but nearly 70% of renters are pet owners. So imagine implementing a policy that reduces the chance of renting out your vacancies by 70%. So basically, renter's insurance is a tool that can be used to handle all of these concerns and help to keep you and your tenant on the same page and on the same team. The last thing that we'll mention regarding renter's insurance is that we highly recommend that you either encourage or require all of your tenants to get it. As mentioned earlier, our leases state that the tenant is only required to have liability to landlord insurance, just as the bare minimum. But whenever we sign a lease with a new tenant, we inform them of the benefits that they will receive if they shop for a renter's insurance policy on their own. In many cases, it will actually be cheaper for them anyways, because if they simply want us to purchase insurance on their behalf, we also charge a processing fee. So getting their own renter's insurance policy is definitely the best bet. Finally, let's briefly discuss commercial liability insurance. Now, there is quite a bit of detail that we can go into here, but for now, we'll just cover the basics. This type of insurance applies to tenants that occupy your commercial properties, such as offices, retail centers, or industrial buildings, where the lease requires the tenant to provide their own insurance. So for example, in the many triple net leases that we manage. Typically, the tenant will be required to carry a certain amount of general liability insurance. For example, $1 million per occurrence. That insures against claims of bodily injury, personal injury, and property damage. They will also need to list you as what is called an additional insured to the policy. This simply means that if someone tries to sue your tenant, and then by extension you as the landlord, for something that occurred inside their rental unit, you are covered as well. Some landlords also require policies such as business interruption insurance, commercial auto insurance, or other specialized policies. So that was our basic rundown of insurance policies that your tenants should have in place in order to protect you and your real estate investment. Sure, it's not the most glamorous topic, but it is a vital part of keeping things running as smoothly as possible, even when unexpected challenges might arise. Now we'll go into even more detail about what to look for when presented with an insurance policy in future videos. But until then, if you have any tips or experiences that made an impact on your investment, feel free to share that with us in the comments down below. And if you got any value out of this video, please give it a like and help support the channel. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.